Good afternoon and welcome everybody to the ProStratus CMMC presentation. Today we're going over the journey of CMMC, and it's going to be a great event if you're a first-time user just learning what CMMC is all about, or if you are in it for a while and just need to kind of like get some more information on one of the details. But welcome to the roadmap to CMMC compliance, the essential steps for achieving cybersecurity certification. Here's a little quick view of the agenda that we'll be going over. Really, it's the steps, the different phases of CMMC. That's what we're really going to concentrate on. Thomas, if you can go to the next slide, we'll go over the agenda there. And really, we're going to take you on a journey of the roadmap. There's sometimes some confusion on the exact steps that people need to take. We're going to really kind of walk through those one at a time and provide some insight just to kind of provide some structure to everybody to help them get organized and prep for what's going to be coming down the road for your CMMC journey. We'll also be going over how to prepare the CMMC assessment. And then I think it's always great at the end, we're going to be going over some worldwide lessons and case studies to give people some practical applications for that. So let's go to the next slide. I'm just going to go over an overview of a little bit about the introduction to CMMC compliance and who ProStratus is. Maybe the next slide there. So just a little bit about ProStratus before we sort of jump in, to the actual webinar. ProStratus is a certified CMMC level 2 MSP. And where we kind of live in the ecosystem is I like to call we're the fixers. You have the C3 APOs that do the certification and the mock assessments and those types of things. But when folks need a helping hand to get compliant, to fix things, to analyze, to consult, to provide advice, to provide solutions, that's where we step in. There's only a handful of certified MSPs out there. I think we were number 8 out of 40,000 MSPs out there in the U.S. We were number 8 in the ecosystem. There's been more that have joined us since then, but a pretty small subset of that. We kind of grew up with CMMC. We've been active in it for years, consulting our clients that are DIB contractors, and getting them compliant for NIST under the current regulations, and then preparing them for what we knew that was coming. We really leaned into it hard, learning the ecosystem, getting plenty of people staffed up and certified in there, and that is a big component of what we bring to the table is having a certified staff. I'll let Thomas maybe speak on that just a tad. But we understand the ecosystem. I would like to introduce Thomas Saul. He's our Director of Security and Compliance here at ProStratus. He is, I would say, more than knee deep. He's shoulder deep and sometimes underwater on the fast changing ecosystem for sure. He consults directly with NIST on some projects. He's certified himself in many areas. And, he's in the debate, or, Thomas and the team, we're in there like learning and establishing the baselines. There's a lot of things, I hate to say are up in the air, but some things that certainly need to be ironed out. And we're involved in those discussions. So we have a very good understanding where we are. And we're in a unique position to guide our clients and others and help folks take on this new requirement. So, Thomas, I'm going to throw it back over to you. Maybe you can kind of give a little bit more of an expanded introduction for yourself, and then we'll take off on the presentation itself.
Sure. So, as Tony said, my name is Tom. I'm the Director of Security and Compliance for ProStratus. Been with ProStratus for quite a while now. And yeah, as far as being embedded in kind of the CMMC ecosystem, we've been involved in this for 3-4 years now at this point. Since before people believed it was going to be a real thing. We kind of saw the writing on the wall and put ourselves in a position to to become experts in this area. I'm a CCA. My team includes CCAs and CCPs, and so we like Tony mentioned, we get into the mix with some of the very nuanced pieces of some of these objectives and controls. As many OSCs have discovered, there's some things that are very cut and dry with CMMC, and then there's some things that start to get really gray and murky the more questions and the more specific the environments become. So, do you want to should we just jump right in, Tony? Should we just get going?
Yeah, let's go. Why don't you kind of walk us through and do a little prep, and then we'll start down the journey together.
So just to kind of from a big picture point of view, to look at what CMMC is, why it's important, how it applies, and all of those things. First and foremost, I think one of the pieces of information here that cannot be stressed enough is that there's now a sense of urgency to CMMC. It's not an esoteric thing that might happen someday. With the rules going final, there's imminent dates where CMMC requirements will be showing up in federal contracts, and so I don't think we can stress that enough. That very soon it will be showing up as a requirement, and it might already be showing up in requirements depending on, or as a requirement depending on who the prime is. If you're a sub for one of the big primes, Lockheed Martin, right? Northrop Grumman, all of those. I know it's already showing up as a requirement in some of those contracts. So what is CMMC? It stands for Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, right? It's more than just self-attestation and saying, yes, we're good. It's requiring a third party to come in and tell you that you're good. And so that's a big component to this that's new. The requirements aren't new. But the requirement to be assessed is new. So again, it's a maturity model, and essentially it's based in cybersecurity best practices to make sure that the defense industrial base is protecting CUI, controlled and classified information, in a way that's appropriate and falls in line with what the DoD wants. So there's two types of information that applies or that falls under CMMC. The first is FCI, federal contract information. And this is anything and everything that has to do with federal contracts, right? So accounting that goes along with it, the contract itself, that's all considered FCI. And then CUI, which is controlled unclassified information. And these are everything from schematics to recipes, blueprints, all of those things that this whole program is built around, right? CUI is meant to be shared, but it's meant to be shared with those who are authorized and done so in a secure manner. One of the ways that I like to describe what CUI is, or how you can tell the difference, is it's not classified, right? It doesn't fall into the needing a clearance in order to view it realm, but it's also not something you could just find from a Google search. So it falls into that in-between area where it is protected information, and oftentimes enough of it put together makes it classified, but CUI itself is not classified, and again meant to be shared. But this whole program is designed to protect the CUI. So under CMMC now, if it is a contract requirement, it is a requirement. There is no option. The contracts can be revoked. Further down the line, that you might not even be able to win an award if these levels of certification are not achieved. So yeah, again, it applies to anyone in the defense industrial base that is handling FCI or CUI. And we'll get into the difference between FCI and CUI here in just a little bit. So federal regulations in the CMMC program rules. So just a couple of things to note, and I'm going to go over these very quickly because this is not a legal course, but here are some of the things that have kind of outlined or put the structure around the CMMC program. First is the Executive Order 1355-6, which essentially established the CUI program. So again, this came out of 9/11 honestly, 24 years ago, where they discovered after investigating that if enough information had been shared between different departments, that the response of the United States would have been and could have been a little bit different. And so the CUI program was designed to do away with all of those interagency problems. So FOUO, FYSA, all of those designations, CUI covers that so that it can be shared. The CMMC program rule came into effect with the 32 CFR, which essentially establishes CMMC as a DoD initiative and establishes the idea that it's not okay for organizations to just self-attest, that there will be an assessment process by third parties in order to make sure that all of the controls and objectives are being met. And then finally, about the 32 CFR, that's the one that went into effect and was finalized in December of last year, so almost a year ago. That's what kicked off all of the assessments. That's what kicked off, kind of the mad scramble, I guess you could say, with the defense industrial base to finally get this done. It made it very real. With that, CMMC established 3 different levels. So a long time ago, CMMC 1.0, there was 5 levels. They reduced that down to 3. Level 1 is the protection of FCI. So if all you have is just federal contract information, you're not working with or producing CUI, you still fall under level 1. These there's only 17, 15, 17. There's a couple of controls that are combined, but these could be self-attestation. So these do not require C3PAO to come in and assess you, although you could still do that in order to get an official certificate. Level 2 is where pretty much 95% of the industry is going to fall, and that is organizations and companies that do deal with CUI. So they have FCI in their environment and they have CUI in their environment. And that is the full breadth of NIST 800-171 R2. So within that, there's 110 controls, 320 objectives. Every single one of those must be met in order to get your CMMC level 2 certification. And then there's level 3, and that is that's NIST 800-172. And that is 134 controls. The only people that can assess that are DIBCAC, which is the government organization that's responsible for assessing cybersecurity controls. How do you know what level you are? It'll state it in your contract, right? But again, the biggest confusion is going to be between level 2 and level 3. If level 1, if all you have is FCI, then it's just level 1. If you have CUI, it's going to be level 2. But once again, if there's questions about that, your contracting officer will have the answer to that. All right, so the big one. This is the November timeline. This is the 48 CFR rule. So this right now, the effective date is November 10th, 2025. It's still in congressional review, technically, but there has been zero pushback against this. So the expectation is that it will go into effect on November 10th. And what that means is that it can begin to appear in contracts. Now there's a rollout, there's a phase program that the DoD has put out, and we can spend more time on that later, or if you have questions, feel free to ask. But essentially the DoD has also said that they reserve the right to move that timeline up whenever they want to. And the reason behind that is that everyone should be doing this already, right? That's their viewpoint, is that everyone should already be doing these things. So it shouldn't matter if it's a self-attestation or if it's an actual assessment, you should be able to fulfill it. And so what 48 CFR is implementing is that in order to receive federal contracts that have a CMMC clause in them, you must be certified in order for the contract to be awarded. You don't have to have CMMC level 2 for CUI, CMMC certification in order to bid on the contract, but you do have to have it in order to receive the award. Why that's important? Typical timeline from bidding to award is about 30 days. Typical timeline to go from 0 to 320 for CMMC is roughly 12 to 18 months, depending on where you are. So if you bid on a contract and you were awarded, that contract and you do not already have that certificate in hand, it is very unlikely that you will be able to get that certificate in hand before being awarded the contract. Again, the scope of this is that it applies to everyone who has FCI or CUI in their environment. Some primes, like I said, even though there's already a phased rollout, some primes are already beginning to require it. The other piece of this is that there are flow down rules. So if you have subcontractors that handle any of your FCI or any of your CUI, you need to make sure that they're certified as well. So there's a flow down to this. It's not just, are you okay? It's making sure that those with whom you do business are also okay. All right. So compliance enforcement and the DFARS clauses. This is where things get a little dicey. Not from the compliance standpoint, but from the responses that the government is able to put out there. So according to CMMC and the way that the program works, once you have your certification, you must recertify every 3 years. And that's by having a third party come in, a C3PAO come in and do your assessment. However, in those in between years, you must still self-attest. Okay. So you still have to go through the process of doing an internal assessment every year. You must keep your SPURS score up to date, right? And the reason why you do that is because if something were to happen and the government came in and investigated and come to find out that, you know, you said that your SPURS score was 110, but it was really only 50. There's a possibility of there being some very serious legal risks there. False Claims Act, losing contracts, all of those things. So in order to maintain your eligibility for the CMMC program, you must stay on top of all of those things. That doesn't mean that if you lose a step or whatever, that someone's going to come in and punish you. There's ways to handle that, but you must be honest of that. So consequences of non-compliance, again, it could lead to disqualification from contracts. There will come a point in time where it's not just bidding on new contracts, but where a CMMC clause is put into existing contracts. So, if you're not planning on bidding on anything new, that doesn't necessarily mean that this won't impact you. And then again, the biggest one, right, is the False Claims Act, and that could include having to repay the contract. That could include jail or prison time, depending on the severity of the violation. So a couple of the key DFARS clauses. One, and this is just for the record, is 7012. That's the one that requires cyber incident reporting. Then you have 7019 and 7020. That's the DoD assessment requirements outlining that third parties must come in and assess. And then the newest one, which is the 7021, that is the one that requires the certification in order to be eligible to receive federal contracts. All right. So again, alignment and consequences of noncompliance. Just want to make sure, touch again on the levels, level 1, level 2, level 3. All of them are based in NIST 800-171 or NIST 800-172 in case of level 3. And all those controls, they're almost verbatim from those frameworks. So NIST 800-171 and NIST 800-171A, which is the one that talks about objectives, have been available for a very long time, and those are the ones that the SPURS scores are based on. CMMC doesn't replace those controls. It sits on top of those controls. The program of CMMC is that you must be assessed against those controls. So that's how the two of them fit together. And then again, the consequences of noncompliance, which we just went over. All right, so how do you build a roadmap to compliance? What do you need to do? What's the best method to do it? It seems like a lot, and it is. So let's talk briefly about how we can get there. The first phase is just understanding it all together. What are your obligations, right? Are you level 1? Are you level 2? Are you level 3? And again, we talked about some easy ways to identify that. Do you have CUI? Right. It's in your contract, whether it states whether you're level 1, level 2, or level 3. And if you don't know, if you're not sure, ask your contracting officer. They'll be able to give you an answer on that. Alignment and understanding of the NIST 800-171 controls. This is absolutely key. And when we talk about the controls, I'm also talking about the objectives, right? So each control has a set of objectives underneath it. In order to satisfy the control as met, each single one of those objectives must be met as well. If one objective is not met, the entire control fails. So look through 800-171, look through the CMMC assessment level 2 guides, all of those things that are available on the DoD's website. All this information is publicly available. None of this is a secret as far as what the requirements are. And then again, verify what type of data do you have, right? A lot of manufacturers are struggling with this because they have CUI in their environment. It's physical, it's digital, right? Get control of what that data looks like. Figure out what CUI is defined as. There's various categories of CUI, and ask people that know about this. Right. Don't try to do this all yourself because there's just no way that that's going to happen. And then understand control inheritance, right? Nobody has an environment that is completely isolated. Everyone uses tools like Microsoft, Google, MSPs, MSSPs, cloud storage providers, all of those things. Every single one of those things, if it touches CUI, is in scope in some way. And so all of those things need to be assessed. All of those vendors need to be approached. Many of them have shared responsibility matrices or client responsibility matrices, customer responsibility matrices. So figure out which controls you're inheriting from those vendors as well. That will help you to identify your scope. So that's phase one. Is basically just gaining a better understanding and figuring out where all the pieces lie and where the connections also lie. Phase two, again, figure out, are you going for level 1, level 2, or level 3? At this point, you should know where that information is. Assess your documentation. A big part of CMMC is not just doing the right things, but having a series of documents, policies, and procedures that point to that you are actually doing those things. Okay. And then evaluate your maturity, right? Assess the implementation of the security controls. Are you doing in some way, shape, or form what all of those 320 objectives are requiring? What I've found in consulting with and working with various DIB clients is that a lot of people are doing the right things. They just aren't aware, and there's not an official process or policy directing them in that way. So figure out where you actually are as far as the cybersecurity maturity or your cybersecurity maturity. And then conduct an internal gap analysis or hire somebody to do it for you, right? It's always better to have someone else look at your work, right? I use the analogy of going to the doctor, right? If I look at my health and I go, I feel fine, right? No big deal. Things are a little, whatever. I could lose some weight and this and that. If I go to a doctor and he gives me a list of things, right, he's going to look at it much more objectively than I would. Same thing with your cybersecurity maturity. Same thing with your compliance with the 800-171 controls. You want to have somebody else take a look at it for you, because the worst thing that could possibly happen is you go, oh yeah, we do that, and then come to find out that you don't actually do that, or that everyone doesn't know that you're doing that. So conduct some sort of gap analysis. That will help you identify where your deficiencies are. And again, from what I've seen, a lot of those deficiencies is in the documentation area, policies and procedures. Once you have that information of what work needs to be done, now you can start to actually get things done, right? So the first step, develop a POAM, plan of action and milestones. What are the steps that need to be taken? What are the documents that need to be created? What are the procedures that need to be followed? What are the screenshots that need to be provided, or new policies, new procedures that need to be implemented in order to satisfy the controls, right? That's the first one. Try to get the low-hanging fruit out of the way first, right? I feel like that's just easy project management. And then aligning people, processes, and technologies. Do you need a new tool, right? Are you trying to whitelist software with the wrong tool? Do you need to add something to the stack? Do you need to add an expert? Is there a person that within your organization that can spearhead this and manage the project? Doesn't necessarily need to be a technical person. Oftentimes it's better if it's not, simply because that person can not get so involved in the weeds that they can actually manage the project and make sure that timelines are followed. And then the processes, right? Do you have an HR process? Is there an onboarding process? How do you deal with access reviews, account reviews, all of those things? What are the processes? So aligning all of those specific things to set yourself up for success is really critical right here in the middle of this process. And then budget and priorities, right? How long is this going to take? Is it going to take a year? Is it going to take 6 months? Is it going to, are you going to bring on extra staff and contractors for 6 months in order to get it done? What's it going to cost? Is if you have to bring in a new tool, what's going to be the cost of that? What's going to be the overall impact? Is it going to be worth it? Right? That's something that I know a lot of OSCs are debating right now. Is the cost of CMMC worth the price, or yeah, the price that of the federal contract? And then again, engage experts in ownership, right? C-level people are critical to this process. They can help get things done. They have influence on budget, all of those things. And if there's not leadership buy-in, and we're going to talk about this more later, but if there's not leadership buy-in, it's going to be a really rough road. And then engage experts, right? Talk to consultants who have been in this field for a while. Engage with CCPs, engage with CCAs, engage with organizations that have gone through the process, whether that be an MSP, whether that be a C3PAO, whatever it is. Get expert help. There are people out there who know things, who live in this world, and most OSCs don't. And so don't try to go at it alone. The fourth phase of getting ready is, again, implementing the things that you've been planning. So do your policies need to be revised? There are a significant number of objectives that are met simply by identifying or documenting in policy what the decision is, right? What is your password policy? Is that written out? What is your screen locking policy, session termination policy? All of those different things, and some of them are being done. Like I said, they're being done by the organization, but they're not documented. They're not written down. So write all those things down. Again, have an expert look at the policies. We've seen many pieces of documentation that it's hundreds of pages long and doesn't address really any of the controls, dances around the controls, dances around the objectives, but doesn't address anything. So engage experts once again. And then access control, right? A big part of CMMC is access control. Are the right people accessing the right things in the right way, and is it limited, right? So if you're not doing that, again, get control of the data, get control of the access, engage multi-factor authentication, follow the principles of separation of duties and least privilege, and begin there, right? Once you begin there and start to move that out, things get a little bit easier as you get on the line. Another big piece of CMMC, I mean, there's a DFARS clause on it, is incident response, right? Do you have an incident response plan? What is it? And again, the DoD is very concerned about how you protect CUI, right? That's the main focus of this whole thing. But an incident response plan could encompass the entire organization. So getting that in place, developing a playbook, working with your vendors, all of those different things that come into play. Excuse me. Yeah, what are the escalation paths? And then also being able to test that, to do tabletop exercises, to do thought exercises with people who normally wouldn't necessarily be a part of those things, right? But say the director of IT is on vacation and is unavailable. What happens then when there's an incident? Who do you go to next? And then also change management. A big piece of CMMC is being able to track and document changes that are made to the system. So if there's not a change management process in place already, it's very important to implement one so that all of those things are documented and able to be proven. And then again, the technical safeguards, right? A lot of NIST 800-171 controls do involve some technical implementation. So being able to put that into place at this point as well will get you ready for your assessment. And then phase 5, I would consider phase 4.5 to be the assessment itself, right? And those things take anywhere between 6 weeks to 3 months, depending on the C3PAO. But phase 5 then would be after the assessment, assuming everything is good, assuming you've done everything you're supposed to, you pass with flying colors, 100%, no problem, the best the C3PAO has ever seen. Now phase 5, continuous monitoring and audit readiness, right? And this is the piece where a lot of people have already begun to slack off, right? Part of CMMC is it's not a point in time test. It's a continuous program, right? It's a cybersecurity program that you continue to follow. And a good part of that is that you're continuously monitoring your environment. This is where a SIM tool comes in very, very handy to ingest all of those logs, to monitor all that traffic, to look at all those alerts, and have a single point of glass that your security team or your MSSP can monitor for you. And then continued compliance, right? A big part of it as well is to consistently review those things that are already in place. That's actually one of the controls in NIST 800-171 is do you do continuous monitoring, continuous reviewing. Things like access control, right? Authorized user list, authorized devices, firewall policies, all of those things are required to be reviewed on a frequent basis. It's oftentimes defined by the organization, but usually most people try to do that quarterly. And then are you ready for your next assessment, for your next audit? Are you ready for your self-assessment? Are the screenshots that you need there? Are the people who are the experts in the control areas who need to be talked to, are they ready to go? Are they up to speed? All of those things require continuous time and effort. And here again, there's lots of experts out there that will help with this portion as well, right? To help keep you on track, project manage, a part of this as well. So those are essentially the first, I would say, or the 5 phases on the roadmap to get you compliant and to keep you compliant with CMMC. All right, so preparing for the CMMC assessment. In the interest of time, I'm gonna speed this up just a little bit. But translating compliance into a defensible story, right? This goes back to what I just said about it not being a check the box experience, right? Compliance is a continuous journey. It's a continuous process. It's a program. And the more you can tell that narrative of how your organization does things, maybe the struggles with it and the mitigating factors that you have, the better off that you're going to be. It's less about just going down the list. Yep, we do that. Yep, we do that. Yep, we do that. It's about how all of it is interlaced, right? Many of the controls and many of the objectives lay into one another and layer over each other. And so while you might be weak in the implementation of one objective, if you're strong in the 2 that lay underneath it, the assessor's going to take that into account. But it's more about how you tell that story. And then using real examples, right? Again, when we're talking about policy to procedure to implementation, we're not talking about an esoteric thought process. We're talking about how does this actually happen? How does it go from one to the other to the other? And then linking the controls and the objectives into your daily operations, right? Make this a part of what you do every day. It shouldn't be a tag on. It shouldn't be we need to clean up our act because it's assessment time. It's going to be much easier as an organization if you're doing all of these things all the time, if it's just a part of how things are now. I know for us, when we went through this process, we had to change a lot internally about how we did things. And that's not always easy, right? Sometimes that's painful. But in order to stay in this space and stay compliant and be competitive in this space, it's just the way that things need to be now. And the last, and this I think is probably one of the most critical things, think like an assessor, right? And this is where I say engage the experts before you even get assessed. Engage people who are assessors or are qualified to be assessors and ask them questions. Hey, what do you think about this? Hey, what do you think about that? What do you think about this implementation? Because at the end of the day, it's the assessor that's going to make the decision. And so you want to think like them as much as possible, right? Make sure that anyone can understand how your documentation flows from policy to procedure to implementation, right? We always talk about this when we're consulting with clients. Hold the assessor's hand, point them to where to go, right? Make sure that they don't have to go looking around, because once they start going looking around, things get bad. If you could take them right to what they need to see, if you could point them right to what they need to look at, it's going to be much, much better. So thinking like an assessor, I think, is absolutely critical in being able to get ready for your CMMC assessment. And then avoiding some of the common pitfalls and things that I've seen go wrong with compliance before. First, superficial, right? Without proper training, without having an entire organization investing into this, without having leadership, it's going to be really difficult. Um, because things are just going to start to fall apart. And assessors are pretty good at what they do, right? And so they are able to start to pick apart things if it's just a superficial compliance as opposed to a bedrock foundation of the organization. Some common pitfalls, again, mismatched policies. A policy says one thing, the implementation says something different. That's a problem. Even if it's more strict, there's ways of writing policies that can get rid of that. But make sure that everything is in alignment. Outdated documentation, right? Oh yeah, we have an incident response plan, and it's dated from 2016. Things like that are going to be problematic. And then inconsistent practices, right? One department handles things one way, another department handles things another way. Unless it's identified in policy what the exceptions are, that's going to be problematic as well. So, but one of the biggest ones that we often see is that there is no documentation, right? That's a very common pitfall. People are doing it right, but they just don't have it written down of what that policy is or what that procedure is. Another common pitfall is that people only address the controls, right? They only look at the NIST 800-171 controls and not the NIST 800-171A objectives. That is a very, very dangerous proposition. You must address those objectives. I cannot stress that enough. And then conduct mock assessments, right? Again, one of the biggest mistakes I think an OSC can make is saying, yep, we're ready. We've done internal stuff. Let's go, and not do a mock. Whether that be a readiness assessment, whether that be a gap analysis or a true mock assessment, any of those things where an outside organization is looking at your work, I think is absolutely critical in order to put you on good footing for the actual assessment. And then building readiness into daily operations. And again, this goes back to what I've said previously, that this is not a one-time deal. It's not a check the box. It is the way that things need to be now. It's an entire program. It's a process. So building that into as much of your daily operations as possible. Automate things, right? Automate reporting, automate SIM logs, automate vulnerability scanning, all of those things. It doesn't need to be done by hand, but it does need to be done consistently and within your policies and procedures. And then track changes and incidents, right? Again, was it a business email compromise? Was it someone actually in your system? Was CUI at risk? Obviously, those things have various levels of reporting that are necessary, but track those as well, right? Even if it's something very small. And then changes. Anything that the system changes, a new an IP structure, new endpoint protection software. All of those things need to be tracked. All of those things need to be approved and run through a proper change management process, right? Where security is assessed, the impact on the organization is assessed, and all of those things need to be documented. And then again, recurring reviews, right? This goes for policies, procedures, everything. They need to be reviewed on a regular basis to make sure that they're still working, to make sure that that's still the way that things are supposed to be being done, and then to verify that they're actually being done. And then again, to make sure that you're consistently ready. Empower team members, right? This is not a one-person job. It's not even a one-department job, right? That's very evident in the controls. I've seen companies try to handle this by just handing it to IT and saying this is your guys' responsibility. But there's a control family that has to do with HR, and IT doesn't have any control of that. So empower teams to become experts in their areas, I think, is very important as well. All right, real world lessons and case studies. I'm going to use us as a case study. Just back in May, well, I guess it was our final went, or our official went final in June. We achieved our own level 2 certification with ProStratus, like Tony mentioned at the top. What did we do well? We were very, very hard on ourselves as far as our gap analysis and our plan of action and milestones. We conducted a very detailed analysis and came up with a very detailed scheduled plan in order to address those requirements. The first thing that we did, though, before even any of that, is we decided as an organization that this was going to be the direction we were going to go, and we made the decision as a team to go that way. Everyone bought in. Everyone was informed of it. It didn't surprise anybody. Everyone knew what that would mean as far as workload and the changes, and so it was a culture shift for us as an MSP. We traditionally work a lot on break fix and do whatever you can to get the client happy and off the phone. And we had to make some changes in that process, slow some things down in order to make it more policy driven and procedurally driven. And then again, obviously the last piece is we had a successful engagement with the C3PAO. Again, I would say one of the best things that we did was to engage them to do a mock assessment right before our final, so that we had the opportunity to correct any deficiencies that would have made us fail. So common pitfalls, we've gone over some of these already, but a big one, over-reliance on templates, right? A lot of organizations put templates out. We have a template stack as well. We always encourage any of our clients, go through these, make them your own. These are templates. You've got to define things within those because it's supposed to represent what you're doing as an organization. Again, neglecting documentation, it's such a big one. Everything is driven by documentation for CMMC. Lack of internal ownership. This, again, this goes back to what I said about the C-suite. If there is not a champion at the top, the program and your efforts to get compliant are probably going to fail. This is absolutely critical that someone is going to push this through budgetary process, through board meetings, whatever else, whatever other red tape or excuse me, legalese is going to come in on top of that. Without a champion, it's just going to fail. And then the continuous compliance. Right. I've had potential clients tell me, oh, okay, so all we have to do is implement MFA before the assessment, and then we can turn it back off again after the assessment, right? An attitude like that, also not good, right? Again, this goes back to the culture shift idea. This is a new way of doing things, and it must be persistent and consistent. Success factors, again, the antithesis of what we just talked about. Leadership buy-in, huge. Right? If a CEO or a CISO or a CIO is spearheading this or buying into this project, that's a wonderful thing. Clear documentation is another one. Documentation that is written directly to the objectives is also huge. Right? It's not paltry. You're not brown nosing or anything like that. Again, this goes back to hold the assessor's hand. Right? Don't write documentation that's not real, but the more clear you can write it, the more concise you can write it and reference it is fantastic, even including something like a documentation library, right, that lists all of the objectives and controls and exactly which policy it's associated with. This also applies to your SSP, right? Again, clear, concise, referencing other documents, all of those things are absolutely critical. And then a proactive security culture. At the end of the day, CMMC is about proper cybersecurity, right? It's about implementing those controls. It's about implementing security best practices. And so starting with that is going to get you a long way. And then you can just worry about the details. But so training your staff on what does good cyber hygiene look like, integrating security as foundation instead of attack on, all of those things are going to go a long way with setting you up for a good journey through compliance. All right, so in conclusion, a couple of highlights. Make sure you understand the regulations. Make sure you understand what's required of you. And again, if there's any question, contact your contracting officer. If they don't have the answers, they can find someone who does. develop a phased roadmap, right? It's a lot. This whole process, especially if you're going from 0 to 110, it's a big process. Phase it out, chunk it out, identify the people who are subject matter experts and can help in those areas, and then preparation and learning, right? Read the documentation. It is not fun, right? Reading through NIST 800-171 and NIST 800-171A is I mean, it's a slog, but it's very, very important. There's a lot of guidance in those things, and otherwise you're going to be running around blind. The other thing about that in preparation and learning is engage experts, right? Engage people who do know what they're talking about. They'll be able to help you. And again, I've been a part of this ecosystem for quite a while now, and so has ProStratus. And it is an amazing group of people that is wanting nothing more than to help organizations get compliant and do things the right way. So there's a lot of people out there who are willing to help, and who have lots of expertise. Engage those people, ask them questions, consult with them so that they can help you get you to where you need to be. All right, Tony, I know we're running a little long on time, but
Right. No, it's a great job. You make it sound so easy, Thomas.
it is
Just a
not
couple of
easy. You know this.
couple of tidbits and just follow-ups. One is, why are we doing CMMC? Thomas kind of hit it there towards the end, is to implement proper cybersecurity controls, really to protect our nation. It's our patriotic duty. It's now a requirement if you want to do business with the DoD to do it, but it's really about being a patriot at the end of the day. And I think if you keep that in mind, you're going to sort of do things the right way. The second thing is just buy-in and assigning the appropriate amount of resources internally. Even if you decide to work with an external service provider like ProStratus, you need to make sure that you have people on your team, there to kind of do the work and get things done. And because at the end of the day, it's really about your business, and nobody knows it better than you do.
I think that's a really good point, Tony. No matter who you're working with, right? Even the best of the best can only get you about 80% of the way there.
Right.
Right. You've got to have someone on the other side who gets you to that 20%.
Thomas, we did have a few questions come in, and maybe we can rapid fire this.
Sure.
But these are kind of typical, I'll call them the 7 typical questions that came in for the chat. Most of them are we've seen before. And I'll just kind of throw them at you and maybe give me a quick response.
Yeah.
We can certainly follow up with everybody individually, and maybe these will be other topics that we want to take on in more depth. But just really, how do we best prepare and organize our CUI? What's the best strategy for that?
So the best strategy, honestly, is to, step one, identify where it is, right? Is it physical? Is it digital? Is it both? And then for ease of the assessment, to try to limit where the CUI lives for as much as possible, right? I know, I've worked with clients that have physical CUI floating around a manufacturing plant, right? They had to develop a new process in order to better control that. If it's an entirely digital environment, that's a little bit easier because you can use things like SharePoint or a file server. But to begin to scope where that is, and if you're having trouble identifying what is CUI and what is not CUI, I think engaging with an expert is a really good way to do that. First and foremost, again, talk to your contract officer, because CUI begins with the contract. However, there are other categories like derived CUI where it's CUI that's developed by the contractor, or the OSC, that's derived from the original CUI, but it's still considered CUI. Right. And so how do you scope that? So those conversations, I think, are critical. It's also really important to not over categorize, right? You can't just say, well, everything's CUI. That's not a good way to do it either. So you've got to find that happy medium between, is it actually CUI or is it not CUI and out of scope?
Okay, great. Here's one. You mentioned flow down requirements. What vendors does that apply to?
Any and all. It goes all the way down. So if a vendor of yours is receiving CUI, it is your responsibility to ensure that that vendor has their level 2. Now, it's not your responsibility to put the things in place to get them there, but they need to provide that level 2. And then if they have that CUI flow down to someone else, the same process applies. So ultimately, and this is where it's going to come to a head pretty quickly, I think, it's ultimately the prime's responsibility to make sure that the whole flow down chain is certified. But as a sub of a prime, if you're giving that CUI away or sharing it, it is your responsibility to make sure that whoever you're sharing it with is CMMC certified.
Okay. I think you answered this a couple of times. I'll still ask it though. Here's a good question. How do we determine what level is required for our upcoming contract?
So there's two ways. There's the official way and there's the unofficial way, right? The official way is it should be in your contract, and if it's not, ask your contracting officer. The unofficial way is if you have a federal contract, you're probably going to be level 1, right? It's FCI, it's federal contract information. So if you have a federal contract, you're doing work for the federal government or the DoD, you're going to be level 1. The breaking point between level 1 and level 2 is, do you have CUI? Right? If you don't have CUI but you have a federal contract, you're level 1. If you have CUI, you're level 2, and you might be level 3. And that's where the distinction needs to come in with your contracting officer.
Okay, great. Here's one. I might be able to answer this one. Is how much does it cost? And that's a really tough question to just say generically, but we want to point everyone to our website. There's like a 2 or 3 minute survey that you could take. Go out to pro-stratus.com, fill out that survey, answer a few questions, and then it comes up with the industry standards, pricing. So I can talk a little bit just about the different types of costs that you might see. One is your actual assessment with a C3 APO, cost on that for the actual assessment certification portion of that. That could just be a one-time cost, or if you decide to do a mock, which we encourage, sort of a practice run, that could be an additional cost. And then just whatever cost it takes you to implement the controls. So if you need some consulting, that would be a cost. If you need to do some remediation, new infrastructure, new software, new tools, that could be a cost. And then the people doing the work, if that's an external cost or an internal cost. And all that is sort of laid out in that survey if you want to go hit the website and check that out.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, it's going to cost something, right? It's either going to cost your time, or if you hire outside people to do it. And I know that's a concern for a lot of OSCs. I know of a number of clients of ours that are actually tagging on certain percentages to government contracts in order to help defray some of this cost. But it's going to cost you somewhere. It's just unfortunately it's the way that things are now, and if you want to be in the DIB space, it's a requirement.
All right. Here's another one. How long does it take, and is it possible that I can get it if I can get an extension? Or I'm
So
sorry, not how much cost. I'm sorry. How long does it take, and is it possible to get an extension?
so again, it depends on where you sit in the process, right? From when you engage with this. But I would say usually it takes anywhere between a year to 18 months to get fully ready. Now, getting an extension. So the assessment process, once the official assessment happens, there is a period of time that it can be extended, that you can work on POAMs. There are certain controls that are POAMable and certain controls that are not. And so if you hit one of those controls that is not met, that is POAMable, and changing that control and doing everything that you would need to get that control to met, doesn't impact anything else and doesn't put anything else at risk, you have 6 months in order to get those done. So there's a couple of stipulations with that. So once again, the assessment happens. There's some things that you didn't get right. They're on the POAM list. The most you can have on the POAM list are controls that add up to 22 points. So the lowest score that you can have and be provisional is 88. Okay. Then you have 180 days to address those poemable controls. After that 180 days is up, those controls will be assessed. Sometimes they'll assess other controls still. And if you are not at 100% at that point, then you fail. So after that 180 days, you need to be at 320 objectives met, or you will fail. There's no extension past that.
I think you actually answered the next question with your last explanation. But the question was, is for level 2, 320 objectives, 110 controls, do I actually have to get 100%?
Yes.
I think you just sort of, yeah.
Yep.
All right. I think
And that's
just the last
what I
one.
would say, Tony, as a rider to that, right? If you're just getting started in this process, and you're thinking, okay, when am I going to schedule my mock? When am I going to schedule my final? I've got contract obligations coming up. Don't enter into the final stages of this if you have items on your POEM. You should enter into a mock assessment with a C3PAO or your final, knowing or anticipating that you will get 100%. If you go in with items on a POEM saying, it's okay if we miss this one, we have 6 months to clean it up, that's just a really, really bad approach.
I agree. And the last question I have here is just the difference between a C3 APO and an external service provider like ProStratus. What are your roles and responsibilities?
Sure. So companies like ProStratus, we help you get there, right? We have shared responsibility matrices. We have consulting capabilities. We have policy templates. We'll help you write your SSP. We'll train your staff on CUI and how to identify it. A C3PAO, man, yeah.
I love the name.
I know. They are the ones that conduct the assessment. So they cannot do consulting and assessing, right? They have to be two separate entities. Just like ProStratus, if we come in, we consult, we help you get there. We can't be the ones that provide the assessment. We can't, test our own work essentially. So that's the difference, and that's why it's really important. When you're looking at consulting or putting the tools in place to get ready, to work with people like us, because we can also direct you to really good C3PAOs, right? We have lots of relationships with them. I mean, we had our own assessment, right? So we C3PO came into that. But so that's kind of the difference. One is the doers, and then the other is the assessors, right? Assessors cannot consult. They can't tell you, if the market control is not met, they could tell you what you did wrong. They can't tell you how to fix it. We could step in and say, okay, here's what we need to do in order to get you to met.
Right. And since a lot of our, we've gone through the system and a lot of our shared responsibilities matrix, so you can actually inherit some of those controls using our services. So. But it is all one big ecosystem. We're all here to help. We're all here to be patriots and work together to implement this to make our country stronger. So, Thomas, I wanted to thank you for the detailed roadmap there. We're going to be producing some other videos more detailed on subjects. If there's anything else you'd like to know or like to hear, give us a shout. Also visit our website. We got plenty of information, other tools that you might want to take a look at. And if you just want to have a conversation, reach out and let's have a chat. So want to thank everybody for attending, and we'll talk to everybody here soon.
Thank you. Thanks, Tony.
Thanks a lot. Bye.